Cognitive load is the amount of sort of mental processing power that's required to use a product or application. It's all about removing barriers which can make it difficult for users to interact with your user interface. Now, good visual organization really improves usability and more specifically, legibility. So it allows users to quickly find the information that they're looking for. And because of that, they're able to use the interface much more efficiently. So when designing layouts, definitely suggest you construct some sort of grid system or visual rhythm, which can help to avoid that visual clutter that we sometimes find ourselves in. You want to apply sort of general principles of content organization, such as grouping similar items together, numbering lists of items, and using headings and prompt text. So this is all about avoiding presenting too much information at once. And you can even use some of these progressive disclosure patterns that we'll talk about in a second to accomplish that. So yeah, I just hinted at it, but the next sort of principle or tip is around progressively disclosing information. This is a really good tool to manage complexity. What you're doing here is deferring sort of advanced or rarely used features to secondary screens, which makes the high-level application much easier for users to learn and grok. So this can be applied all over your app in many, many different ways. My examples here show what we had for the ICC 2022 conference website. You'll notice, sessions are collapsed by default. You get the time, the most important information is bubbled up to this top. You get the time, the title of the session, the type and track. But then users are able to opt in to exploring and getting more details and specifics about each session by expanding the accordion area. And then the second example here, this is the DoorDash mobile application. They do a really good job of using horizontal space, which is oftentimes forgotten about or neglected in mobile apps. So they're showing the most common or popular items first in the list, but again, that they allow users to opt in to exploring more by horizontally swiping or scrolling through these lists. And I just wanted to highlight this horizontal scroll on mobile because it's a really great way to save space, gain more space and real estate that you might not have had with just a big vertical scroll. And it's a very, very natural input method while you're on mobile. You just swipe your thumb naturally left to right across the screen. So it's a nice intuitive experience. Okay, so I said I was going to demo the two together. So let's jump into the final principle of mobile design, which is making user interfaces consistent. Consistency is a very, very essential property. A lot of these other themes and tips and principles kind of lean into it. But yeah, the main idea around consistency visually and functionally is the idea of providing like transferable knowledge. So users are able to transfer existing knowledge they have about using, just applications in general in their daily lives into your product. So the first sort of side of the coin is visual consistency or style. Your visual style should definitely be consistent across your application. You want to be using the same colors, fonts, icons all throughout the product. For example, a submit button on one page of your application should look the same on every other page. You don't want folks having to guess what button does what because it looks different or is treated visually different in different places. Similarly, any color that's used to convey meaning should be strictly applied. I believe I talked about that a little bit already, but in this example color palette, you'll notice that red is named error. It's not just red. Naming colors as well is a powerful way to sort of ensure that they're applied the same way by maybe other engineers in Ignition. Okay, so the other side of consistency is about behavior or functional consistency. So this sort of just means that interactive elements within the app should work the same way throughout the interface. So, menu items and lists, sorting and filtering tools, you definitely want to template and reuse those everywhere that you can. So again, users aren't guessing at how things work, or that they don't have to relearn, 4 different ways to filter lists of items throughout an application. That's just frustrating. Too much work for, everybody. You as an engineer have to maintain 4 different ways to filter items. Users have to learn 4 different ways. It's just frustrating all around. So having that functional consistency in your controls is pretty powerful, even though it feels subtle. Okay, then to demo a few of these principles of cognitive load and consistency. Okay, so progressive disclosure. There's quite a few examples of this throughout the application. So I just wanted to highlight a few and how we're using them. Starting off right here on the home page, we have, like in the DoorDash application, this nice horizontal scrolling list of filters. So these are like saved past filters of work orders. The user is able to, bubble up automatically their most frequently used filters to the top of the list, and others that they've saved are available with a nice, easy thumb swipe. So you can imagine, the size of these cards is a little bit big, and having them all just vertically centered or something like that on the screen would take up a lot more room than is necessary. So we're utilizing that nice progressive disclosure pattern there. Additionally, on work orders, this is a little bit more subtle, but the work order itself, these cards, they are similar to the ICC website example I showed you earlier. They're sort of bubbling up to the top front level page here, the most important information about this work order, which gives the user like just enough context about what they are, the status of them. In this case, who it's assigned to. This is sort of a user avatar bubble with initials. And additionally, their numbers, which are used to reference them throughout the system. And then clicking into any work order gives you a lot more context, a lot more details about that specific work order. So you've got the details. We also have tasks of how these operator or employee can complete or start these tasks that are assigned to the work order. And finally, there's a whole sort of historical record of changes that were made to the work order, comments on the work order, and additionally, you can enter your own messages. See, Bob Builder right now just posted, hi there. So again, that's just a nice way of progressively separating out most important information from what a user might want to opt into learning more about by taking an action. And then finally, I wanted to highlight on the assets page, we also included these headers here being expandable and collapsible. So a nice way to do this might be to, by default, only have the user's, most nearby location pre-expanded, and then allow them to opt into expanding other locations with a press. Okay, and then visual clarity. This is a little bit hard to show in the actual emulator there, but I took one of the screens and did the sort of box model overlay on it. So this is showing how our consistent use of both type sizes and spacing and margin and padding and the icon sizes are all consistent throughout the application for top level actions. It just gives you an idea of visual rhythm, sort of. So your eye is easily moving around the application and interface. It allows your user to just have that feeling of a slicker experience because everything is consistent and clean. So in this case, we're using an 8-point grid system, which is a really powerful one to use. I know a lot of people by default go to 10, but if you start with 8, it sort of gives you much more divisible numbers. So it's definitely pretty common product design practice to leverage this 8-point grid system for sizing elements and padding and margins. It's just a little bit more flexible than a few of the other more round numbers around it. And then visual consistency, again, a little bit hard to demo in the product, but I think we sort of saw it throughout. Just this idea that all of the UI components and inputs and toolbars and taskbars are styled exactly the same way, regardless of the pages and screens that they're presented on. So we're seeing buttons here, which are consistent. All of our inputs are the same height and with the same corner radius. All these sort of really subtle things that, again, really add to the polish and intuitiveness of mobile applications. So having that visual consistency is a pretty good tool to have in your tool belt.